Hey, what's up guys? Stanley here, bringing you guys some more Tower Fantasy news. Today we're going to be talking about if it's possible for Tower Fantasy and Genshin Impact to coexist with each other. If you guys like the discussion we're going to be having today, please leave a like and subscribe, as it'll help the algorithm to push the video out to way more people, and we can have more fans of this awesome game. So, the big question of today's video: can Genshin Impact and Tower of Fantasy actually coexist with one another? I think this is a very fair conversation to bring up because I've heard a lot of people comparing the two games and talking about why they would play one over the other, or how one game is directly competing with another, where in my opinion, these games can exist together side by side. I don't imagine that one game is going to kill the other because both games have different audiences and different people who want to play the game for different reasons. If this was just a one-to-one Genshin Impact ripoff, then this game would probably be swept under the rug and no one would care about it. But because of its differences, a lot of different people who didn't play Genshin Impact or who weren't as interested in Genshin Impact are kind of slowly turning their heads towards this game. If you want the best comparison of this, look at League of Legends and Dota. They're both MOBA games. They both practically look like they play the same, but they're different in terms of how they actually play. Fans of both games can say that on the surface, both games look the same, but when you're actually in front of the keyboard playing the game, they're wildly different, and I think we're underestimating how different these two games can be. Both Genshin Impact and Tower Fantasy are different enough to have their own unique, thriving player bases. I don't see Tower Fantasy overtaking Genshin Impact because obviously it was first on the scene to arrive and it's doing very good for itself, but I could totally see it doing very well for itself in its own lane. I think as fans, we get a little too caught up in the idea that these games look the same and look like they play the same, so they have to be competing with one another, but it's completely possible that these two games will just exist side by side with one another and just do their own things. We have to be honest with ourselves when we're comparing these games to each other. We're not comparing apples to oranges per se, but we are comparing red apples and green apples, if you get what I'm saying. They're two sides of the same coin. Genshin Impact is a 1 to 4 player co-op game, and a lot of people like that fact. A lot of people don't like the idea of sharing a world with other people. They like the idea of having the world to themselves and maybe a couple of friends that they choose to invite. Other people like to be a part of a massive, sprawling world with hundreds of people in it. It's more up to player preference. Some people like the magical aesthetic that Genshin Impact has. Some people like the sci-fi aesthetic that Tower Fantasy has. It's all up to player preference again, and I don't think that these games cannot exist in the same world together. Tower Fantasy, based on appearance alone, will attract a lot of Genshin Impact players. But what a lot of those players are forgetting is that there are way more people who don't play Genshin Impact that are out there that will look at this game and go, wow, this is exactly what I wanted to play. I think we're tunnel visioning on the fact that it looks so much like Genshin Impact that we're forgetting that other people play video games like this too. And when I think of your average anime fan who just wants to play a new game, I think Tower Fantasy will be right up their alley. It allows them to play with a bunch of friends, make new friends, and just hang out and have a good time. Genshin Impact is certainly a fun game, and I definitely think that both games will have their own pros and cons, but I don't think that because they look the same, that they can be written off as directly fighting each other, and one's gonna live and one's gonna die. They both can live! They both can exist in the same place! And I guess it's my fault for perpetuating the idea that this game can be a Genshin Impact killer, mostly for clickbait. We have to be realistic in our expectations. These games are different. These games will attract different player bases. These games will have different fan bases when they're done. It's very obvious to me that Tower Fantasy will just do its own thing and have its own community. A lot of the community might play both games. In the same way that a lot of fighting game players will play a lot of different fighting games, a lot of Genshin Impact fans might just end up playing Tower Fantasy in their free time, and vice versa. A lot of Tower Fantasy fans might just end up playing Genshin Impact in their free time. It's unfair to just say that one will just triumph over the other. But also, it's unfair to write off Tower Fantasy as just another Genshin Impact clone when it's proven itself to be a different game. Remember when people were writing off Genshin Impact as being a Breath of the Wild clone, and then when the game came out, and it was actually relatively different enough? I think the same can be said here. We didn't know how Genshin Impact would do in terms of performance in the West until after it launched, and once it launched, it blew up. It did very good for itself. So only time will tell how Tower Fantasy will do. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to how the community engages with the game. If they are willing to look at the game with a fresh pair of eyes and not judge it for what it looks like. Let's not judge the game based off of the fact that it looks like Genshin Impact when a year ago we were all judging Genshin Impact for looking like Breath of the Wild. I want to see a world where both games exist with one another, and even it would be so cool if both games collaborated. It would be so cool to see in-game banners for either game, like a Genshin Impact banner in Tower of Fantasy or a Tower of Fantasy banner in Genshin Impact. I just think those would be cool. We have to start celebrating what makes us unique and collaborate because of those things. But again, I don't want to get too preachy over here. You guys heard my point, but let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Is it possible for these two games to coexist with one another? I'm interested in hearing what you guys have to say. Anyways, that'll be all for me today. I'm going to see you guys around the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and I am out of here. See ya.